Alright, so the third part, we're going to start with Section K, the hated embargo. So remember, right now, we are kind of caught between a rock and a hard space. The French are attacking our boats if we try to trade with Britain, and the British are trying to attack our boats if we try to trade with France. So what Jefferson decides to do is to place an embargo on all American exports, which is saying that we Americans aren't going to be trading with anybody. Right? The idea here is that he feels that both Britain and France are really, really dependent upon us for raw materials, which is, true. So he's figuring, if we put this embargo in place and Britain and France really start to suffer, they'd be forced then to respect our neutrality or to respect our ships to stop attacking them. So this hope is that the embargo placed on all American exports, saying you can't export anything, America, to anybody, will then force the British to change their policy, to force the French to change their policy. This doesn't work, mostly because, one, Britain is having a bumper crop that year, saying that they have more than enough, they have enough raw materials themselves this year, so they're okay. And then France, of course, had just, Napoleon had just taken over pretty much all of Europe, so he's set. He doesn't really need America. So this embargo doesn't work. What it does do, however, is it wreaks some havoc on the American economic system. So remember New Orleans. New England is all about trade. They don't have good soil. They have really rocky soil. So they have developed a very trade-centered economy. They build ships. So since they can't sell the ships, there's a bunch of, masts and stuff just piling up. Same thing with the South and the West. Our farmers here, they have excess grain. They have piles up of cotton, of all these goods that they're not selling. They're not making money. They're not happy. Okay, so really the embargo hurts America more than it does France or Britain. France and Britain, they can get by. America, we're like, why are you doing this, Jefferson? We hate you. Okay, stop this embargo. So after 15 months, the embargo is clearly not working. They change it with a new act. So before they had passed the Embargo Act, now they're passing something called the Non-Intercourse Act, which is saying we're going to reopen trade with everybody except Britain and France. So you can trade with the Spanish, you can trade with the Dutch, whatever. This Non-Intercourse Act is now just saying we're not going to be trading with Britain and France. All right. So let's see. Because of this embargo, like I said, the economy really suffers. There's kind of like a black market trade going on with Canada a little bit there as well. But there was one kind of the silver lining, if you will, of this embargo, is that it forced Americans to kind of start manufacturing themselves. Remember, we would send the raw materials typically over to Britain. We'd send them the wool, they'd send us the sweaters, that sort of idea. But now, since we have this embargo, we start to reopen old factories. We start building new factories. So really, this embargo is bolstering our manufacturing in America, which is kind of cool. All right. So let's talk about Section L, Madison's Gamble. Okay. So Jefferson, after his 2 terms are up, he leaves. Just taking a cue from George Washington, 2 terms is enough. So he leaves, and his Secretary of State, James Madison, the guy from Marbury versus Madison, he steps in, and he's a kindred spirit with Jefferson, meaning they're on the same page more or less. But they're different people. So before, Jefferson was really good at kind of getting his way with Congress. He would kind of tell Congress what he wanted to do. But Madison, his personality wasn't as articulate, you could say. So really now we're seeing the Congress kind of telling Madison what to do. And one of these fine examples of Congress kind of making policy here is something called Bacon's Bill Number 2. Now, Bacon's Bill Number 2 is replacing the Non-Intercourse Act, which of course replaced the Embargo Act. So this is kind of like third attempt at figuring out how to keep our ships neutral, or how to keep them from being attacked. And it's a gamble. And this is what it says, more or less. it says, we have an embargo on both France and Spain. What we're going to say, for 3 months, we're going to lift that embargo. We said, and now if in those 3 months, our hope is that both sides will stop attacking our ships or respect our neutrality at least. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're neutral, we're not in your war, stop attacking us, please. So we said, we'll lift that embargo for 3 months. If in that time you, France, or you, Britain, are the only one to respect our rights, or the only one to stop attacking our ships, then we will trade with you exclusively. Kind of like, here's the carrot. Come on, here's the carrot. If you're the only one, Britain, if you're the only one, France, who respect our neutrality within that 3 months, then we will trade with you exclusively. We'll stop trading with the other guy. Our hope is that they both decide to trade with us. That's our hope. That's our gamble we're taking. We're gambling saying, we really, really want both of them to reopen trade with us, to stop attacking our ships. But the carrot is dangling here. It's just saying, but if you're the only one, then we will trade with you exclusively. This backfires. This gamble does not pay off. You lost your lunch money, Madison. And what's going on now is Britain, kind of being British and kind of full of themselves, Britain's in charge of this huge empire. They're like, America, if you don't want to trade with us, we don't want to trade with you, we're not going to be playing your games here. So it backfires. So France is more than willing to raise their hand. They're just like, okay, fine. We'll stop attacking your ships, but now you have to trade with us exclusively, which means we have an embargo still placed in front of Britain. And this is not a good thing because remember, we want to remain neutral in everything, even economics. And now we're kind of an economic partner with France at the expense of Britain, and it's just not a good deal. So now let's talk about section M, Tecumseh and the Prophet. So what we're kind of doing here in this last couple sections is we're leading up to the War of 1812. The War of 1812 is going to be fought between the United States and Britain, and so this last 3 sections is really setting up why we go to war with Britain. So we just talked about the fact that we have now an embargo against them because Madison's gamble did not pay off with Macon's Bill No. 2. And now we're going to be talking about kind of Britain's role with Native Americans in the frontier. So let's get to it. Tecumseh and the Prophet, section M. So in 1811, we have the 20th Congress comes into being. So new fresh meat coming in. And a lot of them were from the South and the West, of course, a Democratic Republican stronghold. And a lot of them are young. And a lot of them are kind of hot-headed, as you should say. Their fathers had fought in the Revolutionary War against Britain, and now they're kind of sitting in Congress looking at all this stuff Britain is doing to the country and wanting to stick up for America. They're called war hawks. They wanted to go to war with France to kind of show both, with Britain. They wanted to go to war with Britain to show kind of like, you don't mess with America. Like, they were very much hot-headed young folks in Congress. Is actually a minority, but they make a lot of noise. Young people do, just so you know. They're a minority in Congress, but they made a lot of noise crying for war. We want war with Britain. And one of the things they point to is the Native Americans. So at this time, there are 2 Native Americans who are brothers. Tecumseh is one of them, and then the Prophet is the other. And these 2 brothers, what they're trying to do is they were trying to unify a bunch of different Indian tribes that were east of the Mississippi. So these are people who are being intruded upon by white settlers. Okay? So these 2 brothers are trying to unite all of these tribes that are east of the Mississippi into a confederacy, right? Kind of band together against these American white intruders. So they kind of test their strength out in a famous battle. It's called the Battle of Tippecanoe. What was happening is the governor of Indiana, the Indiana Territory, his name was William Henry Harrison. Well, he started to advance troops, or a bunch of troops were started to head towards the headquarters of the Native Americans. And that was at the junction of, whatever. It doesn't matter really where it was, but it was at more or less Tippecanoe, thus the name, the battle. So as William Henry Harrison is advancing on the headquarters of the Native Americans, are like, oh, we're going to be attacked. So the Native Americans, instead of staying on the defensive, go on the offensive and attack Harrison's troops. It doesn't work out so well for the Native Americans. They definitely lose. Harrison burns their settlement. And so now, any hope for a confederacy between the Native Americans is over. They tried it. They were absolutely crushed. So now the Native Americans are kind of forced into making an alliance with Britain just to stay alive, because they realize now, after the Battle of Tippecanoe, even when they're united, they're not strong enough to face the United States. So they are kind of forced, you could say, into an alliance with Britain to try to protect their homeland, their rights, that sort of thing. And even Tecumseh, one of our heroes here, well, whatever perspective, one of the leaders here of the this confederation, he actually will then join the British Army. And during the War of 1812, he'll actually die fighting for the British Army. So this is kind of just to show that the British were making an alliance with the Native Americans, who were more or less hostile to us. At least that's what we thought. They were giving them, they were arming them. The British were arming them. So that was another thing the War Hawks were pointing to, kind of just as a smear against America's credibility. You know, they really wanted to stand up for America, and they felt like British were just going too far. They're going too far. We have to do something about it. They're arming the Native Americans. They're attacking our ships. They're impressing our sailors. We have to do something. We can't just let that slide. Our reputation, I don't know. I want to be cool, just anyway. All right, so that's the Battle of Tippecanoe, and that really makes William Henry Harrison to be a national figure, like a household name. Harrison is famous for this heroic battle where he, crushes this Confederacy. All right, so let's talk about the last section N, Mr. Madison's War. This is the War of 1812 now we're talking about. So Mr. Madison obviously being President James Madison. So the War Hawks in Congress, these young hot-headed Congress people, are demanding war. And, Madison, in June 1st, in the year 1812, declares or asks Congress to declare war. And Congress does do so indeed. And it just really starts to really show, the War of 1812, the sectionalism that's starting to emerge in the United States. So we have New England. Remember, New England was a Federalist stronghold. They loved Britain. That's how they made their money. They traded with Britain. So New England hates this war. All right, and then the South and the West was kind of like the stronghold of this war. That's where our friends, the War Hawks, are coming from. Right? There are Democratic Republicans who hate Britain, who love France. So the stronghold in this war, in sectionalism kind of talk, is the South and the West, where we have our Democratic Republicans who hate Britain. So that is that. So yeah, even when it comes to Canada, which we'll talk about next chapter, so Canada is kind of where a lot of this fighting happens, because that's where Britain's the weakest, and it's relatively close, but that's where Britain's the weakest. So the Federalists in New England are really, they don't want Canada to become a part of the United States, because they think of Canada as, this wilderness, this agricultural-based place, and they realize that if Canada were to join the Union, that would be another stronghold for the Democratic Republicans. So that's another reason that New England hates this war. So in the long run, New England almost helps the British or supplies the British more than they do, American troops, which kind of just goes to show, like your book tells us, it was almost like America was fighting Old England, as in Britain, and New England, as in all these Federalists who are just refusing to do anything about this war, who are actually supplying the British more than they are the Americans. So yeah, so now we're kind of getting our feet wet into the War of 1812, and next chapter, a lot of it will be spent just explaining the who, what, when, where, and how of the War of 1812.